The Galactic Defense Council meeting room buzzed with alien voices, each species contributing their unique sounds to the chaotic symphony. Commander Xiaxtal of the Reptilian Empire slammed his scaled fist against the holographic table, causing the three-dimensional star maps to flicker. "These humans are a joke," his voice hissed through the universal translator. "Their entire military contribution is laughable. What do they offer? Soldiers who hide behind rocks and take single shots." General Creel, a towering insectoid warrior with 4 arms and compound eyes, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "My reconnaissance reports show these snipers, as they call themselves, carry primitive projectile weapons. Single-shot devices that fire metal slugs. How primitive can one species be?" The assembled alien commanders erupted in laughter. The crystalline beings from Zephyr Prime chimed like broken glass, while the gaseous entities from the nebula colonies produced sounds like escaping steam. Even enormously stoic rock people from Granite 7 allowed themselves what passed for chuckles in their species. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat quietly at the end of the massive table, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering alien representatives. She had been Earth's voice in these meetings for 3 months now, ever since humanity had been reluctantly accepted into the Galactic Defense Alliance. The acceptance had only come because Earth sat on a strategic hyperspace junction that the Alliance desperately needed. "Perhaps," Sarah said quietly, her voice cutting through the laughter, "you should not judge capabilities you have never witnessed." Commander Xiaxtal's reptilian features twisted into what humans might recognize as a sneer. "Witnessed? We have studied your military extensively, human. Your snipers are pathetic remnants of ancient warfare. In modern galactic combat, we use plasma cannons that can vaporize entire city blocks. We deploy energy weapons that can cut through starship hulls. We have soldiers who can leap across canyons and survive in the vacuum of space. And yet," Sarah replied calmly, "you have been fighting the Void Swarm for 5 years and have gained no ground." The room fell silent. The Void Swarm was the reason the Galactic Defense Alliance existed. These creatures, appearing from dark space beyond any known galaxy, have been systematically consuming worlds. They moved like a plague across star systems, adapting to every weapon used against them, learning from every battle, growing stronger with each victory. General Creel's compound eyes focused on the human ambassador. "The Void Swarm is unlike any enemy we have faced. They adapt to our weapons, absorb our energy attacks, and convert our own technology against us. What could your primitive slug throwers possibly accomplish that our advanced weaponry cannot?" Sarah stood up, activating her personal holoprojector. Images of Earth's military snipers appeared in the air above the table. The aliens saw humans in various camouflage positions, some lying prone on mountainsides, others concealed in urban environments. Each carried what appeared to be an incredibly basic rifle. "You see primitiveness," Sarah said, gesturing to the images. "I see precision. You see ancient technology. I see adaptability. You see single-shot weapons. I see one shot, one kill." Commander Xiaxtal laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "One shot, one kill? Against the Void Swarm? Their smallest warriors are the size of your Earth elephants, covered in adaptive armor that learns from each impact. Their larger creatures are mountain-sized monsters that have survived direct hits from antimatter bombs." "Size matters little to a sniper," Sarah replied. "They're trained to find weakness where others see only strength. They are taught to think 3 moves ahead of their enemy. Most importantly, they understand that the most advanced technology in the galaxy is worthless if it cannot adapt to unpredictable thinking." The alien commanders exchanged glances, their various forms of communication filling the room with clicks, hisses, and harmonic tones. Finally, General Creel spoke. "Very well, human. The Void Swarm has just broken through our defenses in the Proxima Sector. 3 worlds are under immediate threat. We will allow a small contingent of your snipers to join the defense force. When they prove ineffective against creatures that have adapted to weapons 1,000 times more powerful than their guns, perhaps you will understand why the galaxy has moved beyond such primitive tactics." Sarah nodded gravely. "I will contact Earth Command immediately. Our snipers will be ready for deployment within 48 hours. As the meeting dissolved and the alien commanders filed out, many continued their jokes about human snipers. They spoke of taking bets on how quickly the humans would retreat, how many shots they would waste before realizing the futility of their weapons, and how this would finally prove that Earth's only value was its strategic location. None of them noticed the small smile that crossed Ambassador Chen's face as she gathered her documents. She had read the classified reports from Earth's military training programs. She knew what human snipers were truly capable of when they were given a mission and told that failure was not an option. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the oldest weapons, wielded by the right minds, could accomplish what the most advanced technology could not. The transport ship Human Persistence dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proximus sector, and Staff Sergeant Maria Santos immediately knew they were walking into hell. Through the viewport, 3 worlds burned with the sickly green fire that marked void swarm consumption. Massive organic ships, each the size of a city, floated in orbit around the planets like vultures waiting for their feast. "Jesus Christ," whispered Corporal Jake Morrison, pressing his face against the reinforced window. "Those things are huge." "Language, Morrison," Santos said automatically, though her own voice carried a tremor. She had served in conflicts across 3 continents on Earth, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the jungles of South America. Nothing had prepared her for this scale of destruction. The human contingent consisted of 12 snipers, carefully selected from Earth's most elite units. They represented the best shooters from the U.S. Marine Corps, British SAS, Russian Spetsnaz, and Canadian JTF-2. Each carried their preferred rifle, modified with special ammunition that Earth scientists had developed specifically for this mission. "Attention, human vessel," crackled a voice through the communication system. "This is Battle Commander Thexvar of the 3rd Galactic Fleet. You are to dock with our command ship and await assignment to secondary support positions." Santos keyed the communication device. "Battle Commander, this is Staff Sergeant Santos, leader of the human sniper team. We request permission to scout the battlefield and select our own positions." A pause, then what sounded like alien laughter. "Negative, humans. You will be positioned behind our main battle lines where you cannot interfere with real military operations. The Void Swarm creatures are not targets for your primitive weapons." 20 minutes later, the human team found themselves on the bridge of the alien command ship, surrounded by creatures that towered over them. Battle Commander Thexvar was a member of the Crystalline Dominion, his body composed of living diamond formations that refracted light into rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice rang like wind chimes. "Your assignment is simple," Thexvar explained, gesturing to a holographic battlefield display. "You will remain in the rear guard positions, approximately 50 kilometers behind our front lines. When a void swarm inevitably breaks through our defenses, you will provide covering fire for retreating forces." Sergeant Tom Anderson, a 20-year veteran of the British Army, stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, 50 kilometers puts us out of effective range for our weapons. We need forward positions with clear sight lines." "Your weapons have a range of 50 kilometers?" Thexvar's crystalline features somehow managed to convey disbelief. "Our intelligence reports indicate your rifles have a maximum effective range of less than 2 kilometers. Against human-sized targets on Earth?" "Yes," Santos interjected. "But we adapt our tactics to the mission. We need to study these void swarm creatures, understand their movement patterns, and identify weak points." The alien commander's rainbow refractions flickered with what might have been amusement. "Weak points? Human, these creatures have adapted to energy weapons that can melt through starship armor. They have survived plasma bombardments that could glass entire cities. Your metal projectiles will bounce off them like raindrops." Before Santos could respond, alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as tactical displays showed new contacts appearing near the second planet. "Void swarm emergence detected," shouted a communications officer, his voice cutting through the chaos. Massive bioships materializing in the atmosphere of Proxima b. They're beginning surface operations. The main display showed nightmare creatures emerging from the organic vessels. The smallest ones were indeed elephant-sized, moving with surprising speed despite their bulk. Their bodies seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, constantly adapting their form. Larger creatures followed, some as big as buildings, others stretching across horizons like living mountains. All fleets, engage immediately. Dexvar commanded. Full plasma bombardment. Target the largest bioforms first. The human snipers watched in fascination and horror as the Galactic fleet opened fire. Beams of energy that could have powered Earth's largest cities for months struck the Void Swarm creatures directly. For a moment, it seemed the attack was working. Several of the smaller creatures collapsed, their forms dissolving into component matter. Then, something changed. The surviving creatures began to shimmer and shift. Where the plasma beams struck them again, the energy seemed to be absorbed or deflected. The creatures were adapting in real time, their bodies learning to counter the exact frequency and intensity of the weapons being used against them. They're adapting faster than usual, reported a tactical officer. Previous encounters showed adaptation times of several hours. They're countering our weapons in minutes. Santos studied the tactical display, her sniper-trained mind automatically calculating distances, wind patterns, and target priorities. Commander Thexvar, permission to take my team to the surface? Absolutely not, the crystalline being replied firmly. The surface is a death zone. Our most advanced warriors cannot survive down there for more than minutes. Our weapons work differently than yours, Santos insisted. We don't rely on energy signatures that can be adapted to. We use kinetic force and precise targeting. At minimum, we can gather intelligence that might help the fleet. The alien commander was about to refuse again when another alarm sounded. On the display, they watched as one of the mountain-sized void swarm creatures began to glow with absorbed energy. It had taken in so much plasma fire that its body was radiating excess power. Then, it released that energy in a focused beam that cut through 3 galactic warships like they were made of paper. By the eternal crystal, Thexvar whispered, they're not just adapting to our weapons. They're weaponizing our own attacks against us. Santos saw her opportunity. Sir, traditional tactics aren't working. You need something unpredictable, something these creatures haven't encountered before. Give us a chance to prove what human snipers can do. Thexvar's prismatic eyes focused on the small human woman. Around them, the bridge crew watched as more galactic ships fell to the Void Swarm's adapted defenses. Finally, the alien commander nodded slowly. Very well, humans. But you will take only volunteers from our forces as support. I will not order good soldiers to die for your primitive tactics. To everyone's surprise, including Santos herself, nearly half the alien bridge crew stepped forward to volunteer. The surface of Proxima B was a landscape torn from nightmares. The sky burned with green fire as Void Swarm bioships continued their descent, each one disgorging more creatures onto the already devastated world. The air itself seemed alive, thick with spores and organic particles that made breathing difficult even through advanced filtration systems. Staff Sergeant Santos crouched behind the twisted remains of what had once been a beautiful crystal city, studying the massive creatures through her rifle scope. Beside her, Lieutenant Commander Veltar, one of the alien volunteers, watched with fascination as the human sniper made notes in a waterproof notebook. You still use paper? Veltar asked, his 4 arms gesturing in what Santos had learned was confusion among his species. Why not digital recording systems? Paper doesn't give off electronic signatures, Santos replied, sketching the movement patterns of a building-sized creature that was methodically consuming the remains of a shopping district. Digital systems can be detected, hacked, or disrupted. Paper is silent. Around them, the rest of the human sniper team had spread out across the ruins, each taking positions that would have been impossible for the larger alien soldiers to reach. Corporal Morrison had somehow climbed into the skeletal remains of a communication tower, while Sergeant Anderson had found a concealed position in what used to be a subway tunnel. Contact! Anderson's voice crackled through their short-range communicators. I've got eyes on something interesting. 3 clicks northeast, there's a group of the smaller creatures. They seem to be communicating with each other. Santos shifted her position to get a better view. Through her scope, she could see what Anderson meant. A cluster of elephant-sized void swarm creatures had gathered around what looked like the remains of a galactic defense bunker. They weren't attacking it or consuming it. Instead, they appeared to be examining it, their forms shifting and changing as they studied the alien technology. They're learning, she whispered into her communicator. Not just adapting to weapons. They're actively studying our technology. Santos, came Morrison's voice from his elevated position. You need to see this. I've got a clear view of one of the mountain-sized ones. It's not just moving randomly. It's positioning itself to shield the smaller creatures from orbital bombardment. The implications hit Santos like a cold fist. They're not just individual creatures. They're a coordinated force with tactical intelligence. Veltar's translator produced sounds of alarm. If that's true, then our entire strategy is flawed. We've been treating them like animals. But if they have command structures, tactical thinking, then they can be outmaneuvered, Santos finished, a grim smile crossing her face. Morrison, how's your angle on that big one? Perfect. I can see what looks like sensory organs along its forward section. But, Santos, my rifle isn't going to do more than annoy something that size. Santos reached into her pack and pulled out one of the special rounds Earth scientists had developed. Unlike standard ammunition, these contained a dense tungsten core surrounded by a matrix of experimental materials that her briefing had described as classified beyond your clearance level. Load one of the special rounds, she ordered. Target the largest sensory organ you can identify. Wait for my signal. Santos. Anderson's voice carried concern. That thing is the size of a mountain. Even if Morrison's shot penetrates, it's not going to kill it. We're not trying to kill it, Santos replied, studying the creature's positioning through her scope. We're trying to blind it. Anderson, can you get an angle on those smaller creatures that are studying the bunker? Affirmative. I count 6 targets. They're clustered pretty tight. Perfect. Veltar, I need you to relay a message to the orbital fleet. Tell them to prepare for a coordinated plasma bombardment on my signal, but they need to wait for my specific targeting coordinates. The alien officer's translator buzzed with confusion. Coordinator Santos, the creatures have already adapted to plasma weapons. Previous bombardments have been ineffective. Santos adjusted her rifle, chambering one of the special rounds. They adapted to random bombardment. They haven't adapted to precision targeting combined with kinetic disruption. Here's the plan. She quickly explained her strategy to both her human team and the alien volunteers. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Use the sniper rifles to create specific vulnerabilities in the void swarm creatures at the exact moment when orbital plasma strikes would be most effective. You want us to shoot them in the eyes while the fleet burns them? Morrison asked incredulously. Santos, that's either brilliant or completely insane. Sometimes there's no difference, Santos replied. Everyone ready? Anderson, take your shots first. Target the creatures studying the bunker. Aim for what looks like their primary sensory array. Roger. Acquiring targets now. Through her scope, Santos watched Anderson's position. She couldn't see him directly, but years of working with other snipers had taught her to recognize the subtle signs when a shot was about to be taken. The way shadows shifted, the stillness that preceded action. The first shot cracked across the ruined cityscape. Anderson's rifle spoke with authority, the special ammunition leaving a brief contrail as it cut through the strange atmosphere of Proxima B. The round struck one of the elephant-sized creatures directly in what appeared to be its primary sensory cluster. The effect was immediate and unexpected. Instead of simply penetrating or bouncing off, the special round seemed to create a cascade reaction. The creature's adaptive armor, which had been shimmering with absorbed energy from previous plasma attacks, suddenly went dark around the impact site. The strange materials in the human ammunition were somehow disrupting the creature's ability to adapt. Holy shit, Morrison breathed. Santos, whatever's in these bullets, it's working. The armor is down around the impact site. Anderson, rapid fire on all targets while their adaptation is disrupted, Santos ordered. Morrison, take your shot on the mountain-sized creature. Target the largest sensory organ. Firing now. Morrison's rifle boomed from his position high in the communication tower. The shot traveled over a kilometer, threading between floating debris and energy discharges from the ongoing orbital battle. It struck the massive creature directly in what appeared to be its primary eye, a structure the size of a small building. The mountain-sized creature reeled, its adaptive armor flickering and failing around the impact site. For the first time since the battle began, one of the major void swarm creatures showed signs of actual damage. Veltar, signal the fleet now. Santos Scholte. Concentrated plasma bombardment on these exact coordinates. She rapidly called out targeting data for both the cluster of smaller creatures and the wounded giant. High above, the Galactic fleet responded with precision fire. Plasma beams that could melt starship hulls struck the Void Swarm creatures exactly where the human snipers had created vulnerabilities. Without their adaptive armor functioning properly, the aliens' energy weapons cut through the creatures like they were made of paper. The elephant-sized creatures vaporized instantly. The mountain-sized creature staggered, massive sections of its body burning away under the sustained plasma bombardment. Across the comm channel, alien voices erupted in amazement and excitement. For the first time in 5 years of war against the Void Swarm, they had achieved a decisive victory against major bioforms. But Santos wasn't celebrating yet. Through her scope, she could see more creatures emerging from the bioships, and these ones looked different. They were learning from what had just happened, already beginning to adapt to this new threat. "Team," she said quietly into her communicator, "that was just the opening shot. Now the real fight begins." The Void Swarm's response was swift and terrifying. Within minutes of the successful coordinated attack, new creatures began emerging from the bioships. These were different from anything the Galactic forces had encountered before. They moved with deliberate caution, their adaptive armor already shifting to a matte black configuration that seemed designed to absorb rather than reflect energy. "They're learning from our tactics in real time," Santos observed through her scope, watching as the new creatures spread across the battlefield in formations that looked disturbingly familiar. Those movement patterns, they're using military deployment strategies. Corporal Morrison's voice crackled with tension. "Santos, we got a problem up here. One of those new creatures is heading straight for my position. It's moving like it knows exactly where I am." Through her scope, Santos tracked the creature Morrison was describing. It was roughly the size of a tank, but it moved with the fluid grace of a predator. More disturbing was its behavior. Instead of the seemingly random movement patterns they had observed earlier, this creature was advancing using cover and concealment techniques that wouldn't have looked out of place in any human military manual. "They're not just adapting to our weapons," she realized aloud. "They're adapting to our tactics." Morrison, displace immediately. Fall back to secondary position. But even as Morrison began his retreat from the communication tower, Santos could see more of the new creatures moving to flank his position. The Void Swarm had observed one successful sniper engagement and was already developing countermeasures. Lieutenant Commander Veltar, who had been monitoring communications from the orbital fleet, suddenly grabbed Santos' arm with 2 of his 4 hands. "Coordinator Santos, we have an emergency. The fleet reports that bioships throughout the sector are beginning to emit new types of energy signatures. They believe the entire Void Swarm collective is sharing information about human sniper tactics." The implications sent a chill down Santos' spine. If the Void Swarm operated as a networked intelligence, then every successful tactic would only work once before the entire collective developed countermeasures. "Anderson, report," she called into her communicator. "Still in position, but I'm seeing movement that suggests they know where I am too. These new creatures are setting up what looks like a perimeter around my location." Santos made a rapid tactical decision. "All teams, execute Protocol 7. We're switching to asymmetric harassment tactics. No more fixed positions, no more predictable patterns." Protocol 7 was something she had developed during her years fighting insurgents in Earth's various conflicts. Instead of holding positions or following standard sniper doctrine, it involved constant movement, misdirection, and strikes designed to confuse rather than simply destroy. "Anderson, I need you to take a shot at the creature stalking Morrison, but immediately displace after firing. Don't aim for a killing shot. Aim to wound and confuse." "Roger. I have a clear shot at its rear section." The rifle crack echoed across the battlefield, followed immediately by the sound of Anderson moving to a new position. His shot had struck the tank-sized creature in what appeared to be a secondary limb. The wound wasn't fatal, but the creature stopped its advance and began examining itself, trying to understand this new form of attack. "Morrison, while it's distracted, take your shot at a different target entirely. Then, displace to grid reference Charlie 7. Copy. I see a group of smaller creatures near the old transit station. Taking the shot." Morrison's rifle spoke, and another creature staggered as the special ammunition disrupted its adaptive armor. But instead of calling for orbital bombardment, Santos had a different plan. Veltar signaled the fleet to hold fire. We're not going to give them the satisfaction of learning to counter our combined tactics yet. The alien officer's translator buzzed with confusion. But, Coordinator Santos, we have clear targets with disrupted armor. This is the perfect opportunity for plasma bombardment. Exactly what they expect us to do, Santos replied grimly. Watch. As predicted, the wounded creatures began to adapt. Their armor systems reconfigured, developing what appeared to be additional redundancies around areas similar to where they had been shot. They were preparing for the follow-up plasma strikes that had devastated their predecessors. But the plasma strikes never came. Instead, Santos had her snipers continue their harassment pattern. A shot here, a wound there, never following the same pattern twice. The creatures found themselves constantly adapting to threats that never fully materialized, their biological systems straining to counter tactics that seemed to have no consistent logic. They're getting frustrated, Anderson reported. The creatures near my old position are tearing apart the ruins, looking for threats that aren't there. Santos smiled grimly. Good. Confusion is fear, and fear leads to mistakes. Sergeant Kowalski, you've been quiet. What's your situation? The Polish sniper had been silent for the past 20 minutes, which usually meant he was planning something elaborate. I've been observing pattern in bioship discharge zones. The large creatures, they follow specific routes when they emerge, like highways in the city. Go on. If I position myself along one of these routes, I can target multiple creatures as they emerge, but not to kill, to mark them. Santos understood immediately. You want to mark them so the fleet can track their movement patterns. More than that, I want to mark them so other Void Swarm creatures think they are still vulnerable. Create, how do you say, friendly fire incidents. It was brilliant in its deviousness. If Kowalski could make the newer creatures believe that previously marked creatures were still vulnerable to human tactics, the Void Swarm might waste resources attacking their own forces. Do it, Santos authorized. But be ready to move fast once you start shooting. The next phase of the engagement unfolded like a deadly chess match. Kowalski positioned himself along one of the creature highways and began systematically marking emerging bioforms with non-lethal shots. Each creature he hit would immediately begin adapting to counter the human ammunition, but to the newer creatures, they appeared to be wounded and vulnerable. Within an hour, Santos and her team watched in amazement as Void Swarm creatures began attacking each other. The collective intelligence that had seemed so formidable was now working against itself, as different adaptations created confusion about which creatures were actually threats and which were merely marked. Coordinator Santos, Veltar's translator, carried tones of awe. The orbital fleet reports that bioship coordination is breaking down. They're receiving conflicting information from different sources within their own network. Santos keyed her communicator to address her entire team. Phase 1 is complete. We've introduced chaos into their system. Now we move to Phase 2. We're going to teach them that human snipers don't just take shots. We take strategic positions and control entire battlefields. High above, Battle Commander Thexvar watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. The primitive humans with their ancient weapons had accomplished something that 5 years of advanced galactic warfare had failed to achieve. They had turned the Void Swarm's greatest strength, their collective adaptability, into a weakness. But as the crystalline commander watched the human snipers prepare for their next phase of operations, he began to understand that what they had seen so far was just the beginning. These humans weren't just warriors. They were tacticians who thought in dimensions that the galaxy had never considered. The Void Swarm was about to learn why Earth had never been successfully invaded, despite having no energy weapons, no plasma cannons, and no faster-than-light travel. They were about to discover what happened when predators met a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. 24 hours after the human snipers had first set foot on Proxima B, the battlefield had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic warfare history. The Void Swarm, which had spent 5 years evolving into the perfect collective fighting force, was now paralyzed by its own adaptability. Staff Sergeant Santos crouched in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful alien garden, watching through her scope as Void Swarm creatures attacked each other with increasing frequency. Her team had spent the night implementing what she called cognitive warfare, a concept that didn't exist in galactic military doctrine because no one had ever fought an enemy that could think and adapt in real time. Report, she whispered into her communicator. Anderson here. I've got 17 creatures in Sector 4 that are completely motionless. They've adapted so many countermeasures to our non-attacks that they can't move without triggering their own defensive systems. Morrison reporting. Sector 7 is clear. The bioforms there have retreated into their ships. I think they're afraid of their own shadows at this point. Santos allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The key had been understanding that the Void Swarm's collective intelligence was both its greatest strength and its most exploitable weakness. By feeding it contradictory information through seemingly random sniper attacks, her team had created a feedback loop that was tearing the collective apart from within. But the war wasn't won yet. Kowalski, status on the primary bioship. The Polish sniper's voice carried grim determination. I have clear line of sight to what appears to be primary control center. But, Santos, this shot is different. This target, it has not adapted randomly like others. It has been watching, learning specifically from our tactics. Through her scope, Santos could see the creature Kowalski was referring to. Unlike the others, which had shown increasingly erratic adaptation patterns, this one had remained still and observant. It was roughly the size of a skyscraper, but its form was more refined than the others, almost elegant in its terrible alien beauty. It's the command node, she realized, the one coordinating the collective response. It's been letting the others adapt randomly while it studied our actual patterns. As if hearing her words, the massive creature began to move. Its form shifted and flowed, but not with the chaotic adaptations they had seen from the other bioforms. This was controlled, purposeful. It was adapting specifically to counter human sniper tactics. All teams, we have a priority target. The command node has figured out our strategy. If it shares what it's learned with the rest of the collective, we lose our advantage. Sergeant Anderson's voice carried concern. Santos, that thing is huge. Even with our special ammunition, I don't think we can take it down with conventional shots. Santos reached into her pack and pulled out a single round that was different from all the others. Where the previous special ammunition had been marked with standard military designations, this one bore classifications that required clearance levels she didn't even possess. Earth Command gave me one experimental round, she said quietly. They called it Project Deathblow. I wasn't supposed to use it unless we faced extinction-level threat. What does it do? Morrison asked. Honestly, I don't know. The briefing was classified beyond my clearance. All they told me was that it represents every lesson humanity learned in 10,000 years of warfare, compressed into a single projectile. Lieutenant Commander Veltar, who had been monitoring fleet communications, suddenly activated his emergency beacon. Coordinator Santos. Emergency transmission from Battle Commander Thexvar. Long-range sensors are detecting massive Void Swarm reinforcements entering the system. Hundreds of bioships. The command node is calling for backup. Santos felt ice form in her stomach. If the command node successfully communicated their anti-human tactics to the incoming reinforcements, the galaxy would face a Void Swarm that was specifically adapted to counter the one advantage they had discovered. Distance to target? She asked Kowalski. 2.7 kilometers. Difficult shot with standard ammunition. Nearly impossible with experimental round of unknown ballistics. Wind conditions? Variable. Approximately 15 kilometers per hour, gusting to 25. Santos made rapid calculations in her head, factoring in everything from atmospheric density to the strange gravitational anomalies created by the alien city's ruins. It was the kind of shot that existed in the realm of legend amongst snipers. The kind that required not just skill, but a perfect confluence of physics, intuition, and sheer audacity. Kowalski, can you take the shot? A pause. Then, in a voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had spent 20 years perfecting impossible shots, yes. All teams provide covering fire. Keep the smaller creatures distracted while Kowalski lines up a shot. Veltar signaled the fleet to prepare for full bombardment, but wait for my command. The next few minutes unfolded in a chaos of precision. Anderson and Morrison began systematic harassment fire, keeping the lesser bioforms confused and preventing them from interfering with Kowalski's shot. Santos herself took carefully aimed shots at creatures that seemed to be attempting to communicate with the command node. Through it all, Kowalski remained motionless in his position, controlling his breathing, calculating angles, waiting for the perfect moment when wind, physics, and opportunity would align. Santos, his voice was barely audible. I have the shot. But this experimental round, I can feel something different about it. It's almost like it's warm. Before Santos could ask what he meant, Kowalski's rifle spoke with a sound unlike anything they had heard before. Instead of the sharp crack of conventional ammunition, the experimental round produced a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. The projectile's flight was visible to the naked eye, leaving a trail of distorted air as it cut across the battlefield. It struck the command node directly in what appeared to be its central processing structure. For a moment, nothing happened. The massive creature continued its movement, seemingly unaffected. Then, reality around the impact site began to change. The experimental round hadn't just penetrated the creature's armor. It had somehow infected the command node with what Santos could only describe as pure entropy. The creature's form began to unravel, not physically, but conceptually. Its adaptive systems turned against themselves, creating adaptations to threats that didn't exist, evolving defenses against attacks that had never occurred. The effect cascaded through the entire Void Swarm collective. Every creature connected to the command node began experiencing the same conceptual dissolution. Their shared intelligence network, which had been their greatest strength, now carried the infection of strategic impossibility that the experimental round had introduced. Fleet Command, Santos called into her communicator. All weapons, all targets, fire now while their network is compromised. The Galactic Fleet responded with 5 years of pent-up fury. Plasma bombardments, antimatter torpedoes, and energy weapons that could crack moons lit up the sky of Proxima B. For the first time since the war began, the Void Swarm had no adaptive response. Their collective intelligence was too busy unraveling itself to mount any defense. Within hours, the system was clear. The incoming reinforcements, upon sensing the collapse of the command node, had retreated into dark space rather than risk infection by whatever had destroyed their command structure. Later, as Santos and her team were extracted to the Galactic Fleet's command ship, Battle Commander Thexvar personally met them at the docking bay. The crystalline being's light refractions showed patterns that Veltar translated as deep respect. Coordinator Santos, Thexvar said, his voice ringing with harmonics of awe. In 5 years of warfare, we never achieved what your 12 snipers accomplished in 24 hours. How did you know that the experimental ammunition would work? Santos looked at the alien commander, then at her team of exhausted but victorious snipers, then back at the tactical display showing a clear solar system for the first time in years. We didn't, she said simply. But that's what makes us human. When facing extinction, we don't calculate odds. We don't run probability analyses. We load our best shot and take it because the alternative is unacceptable. She paused, watching as the last of the Void Swarm bioships disappeared into the dark between stars. You asked us to prove what Earth snipers could do. I hope this demonstration was sufficient. The galaxy had learned that day that sometimes the most advanced civilization could be defeated by the oldest principle of warfare: one shot, one kill, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Void Swarm never returned to the Proxima sector, and throughout the galaxy, military academies began teaching a new subject: human strategic philosophy, with required reading that began with the simple phrase, "It is better to be feared than loved." The snipers had stopped laughing.